Welcome to Fridays Live.
Hello everybody and welcome to another Find My Past Fridays Live. It is Friday the 24th of May and as always it is my pleasure to be here with you for another look at this week's new records. We've got stuff from the Chelsea Flower Show and we're going to live a bit of 1970s nostalgia as well, so stay tuned for all of that and more. If you are new around here, my name is Liam from the social media team here at Find My Past. And we also have my colleague Ellie in the comments as well. So be sure to say hello to us both. Let us know where you're tuning in from. How are things looking weather-wise with yourselves? What have you got planned this weekend as well? Let us know how things are looking for you as well. I know it is a bank holiday for some of us here. Not myself, not Ellie. We'll be here working on Friday regardless. The show must go on. We've got a few of our regulars coming in already. Nice to see Roz from hot and sunny Massachusetts there. Lovely, nice to see. We've got Daphne. It is Friday today, Daphne. It is warm in Somerset. I'm looking forward to this week's installment. Thank you very much for joining us. Hope it is a good one for you. We've got Gina from Lincolnshire. Andrew, more or less the same as Dundee as well, Lancashire. It's 13 degrees at present, just about 15 degrees or so here. The sun has finally decided to come out. It has been kind of dull and rainy all day, so definitely nice to see the sun, and it's meant to be nice tomorrow anyway, so hopefully that sun stays. Rosie making a very good point, one I did have myself when I was scheduling today's session, that Ellie and Liam and some viewers are too young to have a memory of the 1970s. As I say, I did think this when I was scheduling this as well, that me and Ellie maybe aren't the experts here on the 1970s. We obviously, we know about the 1970s, but we did not live through it, as you say, Rosie. So hopefully you can teach me a thing or two. Anyone who did remember the 1970s, I will be hearing from you soon with the question of the week as well. So you can school me and Ellie on what we missed out on. Who else do we have? We've got a lot of people. We've got Alan, nice to see you. We've got Christine from Redondo Beach. Redondo Beach, is that the name of Patti Smith song? I think Redondo Beach, that name is sounding familiar to myself anyway there, but nice to see you, Christine. We've got Georgia, sunny Essex. Heather is also in a rainy Edinburgh, much like Ellie as well. Victoria, warm-ish in Suffolk. I like that. Warm-ish is kind of how I'm describing the weather so far. I think warmish is the best way to describe it. Is, as I say, not quite summer, despite the fact we are in just about the last week of May. So fingers crossed things pick up for us all soon. I really like this comment already. Front runner for the best comment of the week, Alan saying, if you can remember the 1970s, are you sure you were there? A very good way. I was on the phone to my dad earlier on and I was speaking to him. I saw the Grateful Dead were playing a show in that new venue in Las Vegas, the Sphere, with all those crazy LED screens and everything. And a lot of people there looked like they hadn't left the 1970s, and they definitely didn't look like they remembered much of the 1970s. So definitely a good point, Alan. And on the topic of the 1970s, we do have a question of the week, which is 70s themed as well. If you are unsure why we're talking all things 70s this week, everything will come to light very shortly. But the question of the week is, what is your favorite thing about the 1970s? Obviously, a very kind of culturally important decade. We've got all sorts of great music, films, sport, the fashion, all sorts of things were coming out in the 1970s. So what is your favorite thing about the 1970s? Whether you lived through the 1970s or, like myself and Ellie, just kind of historically look back and adore the 1970s. And yeah, the same music, the fashion, the films, whatever it might be. The question was originally, what is your favorite historical decade? Like, if you could go back, would it be the 70s, the 60s, whatever it might be? So as a kind of caveat, if you don't have a favorite thing about the 1970s, or like me and Ellie weren't there, let us know your favorite decade. Which one do you look back on most fondly in terms of, as say, the music, the culture, the films, etc., etc. Good stuff. So we are, of course, here to talk about the new music. I just read a comment about music and I wanted to say the new music. We're not here to talk about new music. This is Findmypast. We're here to talk about new historical records. And this week we have got updates to 3 existing collections. A big week for those of you with Kent ancestors, because we do have new Kent baptisms, Kent marriages, and Kent burial records as well. Quite hefty additions to some of these too. So for the Kent baptisms, we have 35,000 new records. All of these new parish updates come from kind of similar, not identical parishes, but very similar parishes. We've got things like Greenwich, Woolwich, Hadlow, and more. A full list of them and more information can also be found in the blog, which I'm sure Ellie will be posting very shortly, if not already, because my little cue card is covering the chat at the moment, so I can't quite see. But the Kent baptisms are from 1558 right through to 1926. So nice, really early editions and also some more recent ones as well. I think 1558 is, really far back. It's one of the furthest back I've been able to talk about on this session. So really good edition this week. So that was 35,000 new baptisms. We also have 10,000 new marriage and band records as well, also from 1558, but these ones are slightly more modern, up to 1954 these ones go. So definitely some more recent additions. And the burials are the same, 1558 to 1954. And there are 17,000 new burial records covering those kind of time periods. Obviously, it might not be a full run, but from those selected parishes, which, as I say, you'll find out more about in the blog that Ellie has posted. A lot of new records from Kent. As I say, Kent is always a popular one, I think. I think it always goes down quite well when we have Kent records. A lot of people seem to have roots in the Kent area. So definitely a good one there. But if Kent is not one of your family history locations, we do, of course, have new newspapers as well, covering up and down the country as well. We've got a grand total of over 350,000 new pages added to the collection this week. We've got one new title, which is the Newton and Earlstown Guardian. There's selected years in there, but mostly they cover 1914 to 1952. That was the one new title. And we've also updated the coverage of 30 existing titles as well. As I say, this is up and down the country as well. We've got Arbroath, Derry, Fleetwood, Morecambe, Wigan, all sorts of places. And again, a full list of the new titles and the years available for them will be in the blog post as well. So definitely have a look and check out the new blog post and see what you might be finding in this week's new newspapers. I feel like every single time I do this, I go through the new records quicker and quicker. But sometimes when it's just like 3 updates to parish collections, it doesn't always take the most time to go through the new records. But when I was doing those, I can see a lot of comments coming in from the question of the week. So the less time on new records, the more time we can have a look at everybody's favorite memories of the 70s. And I did caveat by saying if you didn't have a favorite thing about the 1970s, you could tell us your favorite decade. But the 1970s seem to be very popular indeed. A lot of good memories coming through about the 1970s already. So that is very good to see that we're all there. I did actually mean to think of my own favorite thing about the 1970s before I went live today, but I didn't actually think of one off the top of my head. So maybe it'll come to light from some of your answers. Maybe I'll just start agreeing with the people that have got good comments in there as well. What else have we missed about there? Andrew's saying that Earlstown still has a decent market. Very good. Earlstown's not a place I've actually heard of before until this new newspaper came to light. So lovely. I will need to check that out. And as I say, Kent always goes down a treat and sums it up. Yay, Kent. Absolutely. As I say, people always seem to like new Kent records, and just as well because we do update them quite a lot as well. I feel like this is definitely not the first time, maybe even the 5th time or so that I've spoke about new Kent records. So it is definitely, as I say, a popular one. So, as I say, we are going to talk about all things 1970s this week, and it may seem a bit of a kind of strange one, as I say, especially given that it is me who, as some of you know, has only just turned 30, so definitely was not there in the 1970s. Don't want to hear any cheeky comments about that at all. But as I say, we are talking about 1970s, and the reason why is that if you follow us on social media, as I'm sure a lot of you do, if not everybody here, and if you don't, be sure to give us a follow, not just on Facebook, we are all over the place as well. We're on Twitter, or X, I guess I should start calling it now. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all sorts of places. So definitely give us a follow all over the place. And Instagram particularly has been a very popular one over the past week or so, and that is because of what we are speaking about today. So let me just adjust myself slightly there. There we go. So I'll make this nice and big so everyone can see the fantastic photos. So the RHS, the Chelsea Flower Show. So this weekend, I should say, this week going into the weekend, is of course marking the RHS Chelsea Flower Show. And Findmypast were lucky enough to sponsor a garden at this week's Chelsea Flower Show as well, which has been a really exciting thing to see, from the initial discussion stages right through to the garden being built and the garden being available for visitors as well. Really exciting one, really cool partnership, one that we have all been really excited about for a long time now. So as I say, it's great to see it come to fruition and get to where it is now. So some of my colleagues, Ellie included, the very talented Ellie, who took most, if not all, of the photos I'm going to show you here, were lucky enough to go down to the Chelsea Flower Show this week and see the whole show, but most importantly, the garden that we sponsored as well. So the garden that we sponsored, Findmypast, as I say, we're lucky enough to work with this very talented, very creative and amazing individual, James, who also goes by Plants by There on Instagram, etc. As I say, you may have seen him on our own Instagram story recently and various posts, but definitely go and check out his own page as well. Even Chelsea Flower Show aside, as I say, just a really talented gardener, really good follow on social media. The stuff he does is incredible. I'm not a gardener. I don't think I have a living plant in the house. I've got a few fake ones that came with the flat when I moved in. But even as someone who isn't into gardening and plants like that, following James, seeing the stuff he does, really makes me want to just go all in on plants, start getting all sorts in the flat, because yeah, to say, the stuff he does is really, really cool. So this is James, as I say, who we were lucky enough to work with this year on his garden for the Chelsea Flower Show. And here you can see him pictured outside the lovely house plant studio, dubbed Verdant Visions. You can see already there, starting to see where the 1970s stuff is coming in. There you can see the disco balls outside, as well as obviously the main attraction at the Chelsea Flower Show, all those amazing plants outside as well. Even just the color of the building, I'm a massive fan of as well. I think it looks really cool on the outside. We haven't even gone inside yet, and as I say, the outside of it is particularly special. I think it's a really cool looking building, as I say, and yeah, definitely catching the garden bug a little bit here. And as I say, although the 70s theme has kind of been teased there with the disco balls, when you do step inside, you can really see the kind of 70s theme of this come to light. We have got things like record players. I'm sure some of you will remember these kind of record players as well. I do remember my dad's record player, but I think it must have been a more recent purchase. It was more of a big kind of stereo system I remember him having with the record player. Obviously, you can't have a record player without records as well. There's plenty of lovely records on show as well. And again, that 70s vibe really just coming through with that furnishing in the background, those cushions, that print on the sofa in the background. As I say, even to someone who wasn't there in the 70s, I would immediately recognize this as the 1970s. And I think it's just a really cool theme, especially the way in which it was kind of interworked with the plants as well, the kind of whole vision that he had for this houseplant studio with the 70s theme, the way he incorporated the plants in there as well was just really, really cool. As I say, just an amazing guy. Garden design, things like that isn't something I put much thought into before, not something I thought about, but from seeing the team working with James and seeing James work with ourselves, work with all these other amazing businesses that were involved in the creation of the studio as well, I think it's just, yeah, really opened my eyes, as I say. I think it's a really cool thing that he's been able to do here. And getting more into the 1970s thing here, you can see all sorts of lovely decorations. You've got the sound system in the background, that old TV there as well. And you can start seeing where Findmypast were involved with this as well. You can see those newspapers on the back wall, which you do have more detailed photos of shortly. But as I say, that is one of the roles that we played, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And yeah, as I say, big shout out to Ellie for all these pictures. Did really well. She sent me a whole folder full of them earlier, and even from someone who had seen the whole process more or less from start to finish, it's still just really cool seeing all the intricate details and things that you might have missed had the very talented Ellie not been able to take all these great photos of it there. And Karen saying she's not a fan of orange. I feel like maybe orange would be my favorite color, but when you think about the 70s, I think orange and brown is kind of the colors I automatically go to. Maybe it's just a kind of stereotypical view of things, but as I say, I wouldn't have chosen it for my own living room, but when you see it in this, I think it does. Orange seems to be a color that kind of encapsulates the theme of the 70s really well. As I think straight away seeing like that sofa I mentioned, for example, you kind of automatically think of the 1970s. Another thing that everyone thinks of with the 1970s, more orange. Again, I do apologize, Karen, but those disco boots with the plant inside as another iconic thing of the 70s. You can imagine your David Bowies, etc., on stage in boots just like that. And yeah, again, going back to what I was saying as well, that how he's incorporated plants with this theme. I mean, it is a flower show, of course, so it might be silly to say that he's incorporated plants, but as I say, I think the way in which he's done it, it's obviously the plants are there for there, but it's also the whole design, how you incorporate your theme into this, and just little things like someone's mentioned, using the disco ball as the flower pot, using these amazing mirrored high-heeled boots as a flower pot as well, I think is just, yeah, an ingenious thing to be doing. And as I say, I think everything is really, really cool. If you are at the Chelsea Flower Show this weekend, be sure to pop in and see James and let him know that you're a Findmypast member as well. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you all too. But it wasn't just me in my infancy of garden design who thought that this was a really cool garden, and he did really well. I've not seen any of the others, but I'm comfortable to say it is my favorite of this theme. But as I say, it wasn't just me and my amateur opinion. The experts agreed as well, because we're really delighted to say that James did win the Best House Plant Studio Award for this garden, the Verdant Visions garden that I've just virtually ran through with you there as well. So as I say, it's not just me and my biased and uninformed opinion that thinks so. As I say, really fantastic from James, from a Findmypast perspective, from everyone who he's worked with. We've been seeing on Instagram all the different kind of companies that he's worked with, from the people that do the plants, the people that made like those flower pots that you see in the background. Even a bathroom company was involved. I should have put a picture of the bathroom. I think that was a really cool thing as well. But yeah, as I say, from James, of course, and everyone else involved, a really fantastic achievement by James. And it's really cool to see him being rewarded for the hard work that you can see, as I say, from my first foray into the Chelsea Garden and Chelsea Flower Show, seeing even just a snippet of the process from start to finish. It's just, yeah, so much work goes into it. And like I say, amazing to see him be rewarded for this and be recognized by the experts, by his peers, for all the hard work that he's put in there. And as I teased earlier on, we were involved, of course, quite early on. And part of what we did was kind of help with the kind of decoration side of things. As everybody knows, as I've just not long talked about there, we do, of course, have a vast historical newspaper collection on the website, including many, many reports from the 1970s and all the kind of amazing new things that were going on in the 1970s. And these were kind of a snippet of the kind of newspaper images that we were able to kind of collect together for James and the team to get printed up and kind of plaster the walls with. I think maybe Ellie can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was the kind of the window to the door to the studio, covered in these kind of news reports from the 1970s. And kind of this was a real group effort from a Findmypast perspective. Everyone kind of chipping in to find good newspaper articles, good newspaper images to throw in there. We were kind of given a brief, so to speak, of kind of the music of the 1970s and Chelsea Flower Show and just plants in general from the 1970s as well. I think, as you can see from inside the studio, but when you watch old TV shows, old films, we spoke about the kind of interior design in there as well. And I think I always kind of imagine those sort of like hanging plants and things as part of that interior design. So that was kind of the brief we were given, as I say. And like I say, it was a real group effort, people from all over the business chipping in. And definitely the most fun I've had. I remember our colleague Niall put in a shout out late one Friday afternoon, asking if anyone would like to chip in and help find articles on these bands and these musicians and things. And I think you don't have to ask people twice to spend a Friday afternoon diving into the newspapers, finding things about ABBA, about Sister Sledge, about all these great bands from the 1970s. So yeah, it was a lot of fun doing that, and it was really cool to see how this kind of informed the design of the studio as well. I think it was really cool to see, as they be, whether there was newspapers or not, the garden is just amazing. But with that Findmypast hat on, seeing these historic newspapers forming part of the decoration is just really cool. And it's nice to think all the people, all the footfall that the Chelsea Flower Show will be getting this weekend, and everyone will be kind of having a look at these newspapers. So yeah, really, really cool. And I can see some comments coming in about the interior design side of things as well. And Daphne saying that the avocado bathroom suites and candy tiles, funnily enough, I think avocado was actually the color that the bathroom company called the sink and toilet area of the studio. So yeah, bang on theme, Daphne, as you say. That sort of, I remember being younger, going into like my grandparents' house, who obviously had a bathroom done in the kind of 1970s. And like you say, you can picture that sort of green bathroom, even pink bathrooms as well. I remember being in houses when I was younger with pink porcelain bath tiles and toilets and sinks and everything. So yeah, really, really cool. I think as well, this also a comment that encapsulates the interior design of the 1970s that we are speaking about as well. Pickle saying that his next door neighbor had a brown three-piece suit with orange stripes on it. Can you get more 1970s? And their crockery was a matching brown and orange design. It is all coming back to you now. Yeah, like I say, that kind of nostalgic, that is exactly what you picture when you think of the 1970s, is that brown and orange striped three-piece suite. I would absolutely love to see a brown and orange three-piece suite. I would think that sounds maybe not to everyone's taste, but I would, as I say, just to have a mental picture of that, if it isn't clear enough in our minds already, I would love to see that. I think the kind of 1970s interior design is making a bit of a comeback. I think the 1970s. I think it's sort of, you see a lot of people doing up their flats now, and I think they call it sort of that mid-century, I think they would call it these days. But yeah, really cool. It is definitely making a bit of a comeback. So yeah, as I say, back to the newspaper side of things. Before, I've already tried to make this a music session, and we're about to talk more about music. We're going from music to interior design, back to the newspapers there. As I say, we did, as I say, contribute images like this. You can see the ABBA Mania one on there. This is the original from the ABBA Mania one as well. Just going to show you a couple of what went into making these things. We've also got a little quiz as well to get you all, not a quiz necessarily, but a little sort of see who can remember the 1970s with one of these newspaper articles too. So yeah, that was ABBA Mania, of course, big in the 1970s. I think a lot of people these days are kind of thinking ABBA as well for the ABBA experience. The last time I was in London for work, there was a lot of people on that train home who had been at the ABBA experience in London. And yeah, sounds a really strange kind of thing with the kind of 3D models, but really cool as well. And everyone on the train that I spoke to really, really liked it as well. So if you're an ABBA fan, maybe the ABBA experience is for you. We also had things like tour posters as well. There was Rolling Stones Tour of Europe 1976 as well. I think these days you think world tours and you see people are playing in Edinburgh, in Newcastle, in there. But this Rolling Stones one, I think there was about 5 dates in Glasgow. There was about 6 dates in London. If anyone remembers the Rolling Stones 1976 tour or thereabouts, I'm sure you'll be able to corroborate that story as well. But yeah, I think it's really cool when you look back at things like that and you see the tours that some of these bands were going on and the kind of venues that they were playing and how many times they were playing those venues as well. Especially, I think what's cool, like Rose's session last week when she was talking about music as well. I think we've doubled down in the music. I didn't really think about that. Apologies if you're not a music fan, but we'll move on next week. We'll get something else in next week. It was this or football for me, so I'm sure they'll all be glad that there's music doubled down on. But yeah, as I say, when you look back on some of the early tour announcements from some of these bands, I think it's incredible seeing the kind of venues that they were playing. Like, you imagine now if the Rolling Stones or a band of that caliber was going on tour, it would be the big stadiums, the big massive arenas. But when you go back far enough and it's those kind of smaller venues that you see, I think that's, yeah, really hard to imagine sometimes if you think about bands that we know now to be some of the biggest in the world, for example, going and playing these kind of couple hundred people venues is just really, really cool. 2 seconds. Good stuff. Again, saying that houseplants are often termed as a child substitute. It's kind of like pets as well, isn't it? People that care for their houseplants. I know I've got some friends who are very, very into their houseplants. First thing they do in the morning when they wake up is get the spray bottles out, go around the house. They've got various sizes. Every shelf is covered. Every corner of the flat is covered. So yeah, people do take their houseplants seriously. As I say, this was kind of my entry into the houseplant world, was seeing James and the amazing work he's done. So I was going to say I'm going to get into the houseplants, but I think I'm always just going to have James in my mind and think that's the level I aspire to get to. And that's obviously years of expertise. Even his own family going back were gardeners originally as well. He's got memories of growing up in his grandparents' garden and things. So I know my mum was quite a keen gardener. So as I say, maybe I've got a similar family history. Maybe I should get into them, but maybe I'll just kind of sweet talk James and see if he wants to pop up to Dundee and then kept my flat out for me as well. I should have got Ellie to put the word in when she was down this week. But as I say, I did have sort of a quiz, sort of just an article I found that I thought was quite interesting. I'm sure a lot of people would kind of have memories of the 1970s, as a lot of you are saying that you do. So one of the newspaper articles that I found was this one here, which was from the Daily Mirror got it written down, November 1976. This was from, so get your thinking caps on, November 1976. So this was a sort of readers' poll that the Daily Mirror did, and people were asked to kind of nominate their favorite artists of various different categories. No prizes for guessing who the outstanding music personality was. That is, of course, David Essex, who is pictured there. But some of the other categories included things like best male singer, best female singer, a rock group, pop group, best DJ. So yeah, who do you think was kind of, throw out some names. We'll see if they're on the list. I've got the list on the next slide, but I've also got it in front of me in another screen just so I can remind myself as well. But yeah, as I say, we've got solo male singer, solo female singer, pop group, rock band, best disc jockeys, even one. Even if you can remember what singles, what albums would have been popping off in November 1976, then, as I say, throw some names out there. We'll see who remembers the 1970s. Although, as that earlier comment said, if you do remember the 1970s, were you really there? But yeah, who do you think would be forming some of these categories? As I say, for male, female singers, for pop groups, for rock bands. I think this was a bit of an eye-opener for me sometimes reading these lists. I think obviously I'm aware of the 1970s. I'm aware of a lot of these bands as well, of course, a lot of these singers. But sometimes my sort of musical time knowledge isn't the best. Like, I'll know a band, I'll know an album, but I wouldn't know when this came out. So as I say, seeing some of the names on this list, I find it kind of hard to believe sometimes that it goes back as far as the 1970s. Yeah, a lot of names have been flown out already, and a lot of people getting there. Julie's got obviously David Bowie, a very popular one as well. He doesn't appear on the list, actually. Surprisingly enough, David Bowie doesn't. And bang on, Paul McCartney and Wings, definitely one that's there. Mike Oldfield, not one I'd heard of until I saw this. But yeah, Mike Oldfield does make an appearance as well. Alison is given, Osmonds, David Cassidy, the Bay City Rollers. Remember the Bay City Rollers being my mum's favorite band when she was growing up? That was my introduction to the Bay City Rollers. And talk about iconic fashion from the 1970s. I think the Bay City Rollers and the tartan scarves, etc., really kind of encapsulate that. That's one of the first things I think of when I think of the 1970s and that sort of older fashion era, is the kind of Bay City Rollers. Like you say, I remember all my mum's CDs growing up and seeing the pictures of them. And Rosie saying David Essex was gorgeous. Another memory of my mum is saying that, yeah, she was a big David Essex fan growing up as well. I think he was kind of the heartthrob of the era, I suppose you would call him. He was the kind of, I don't know who would be the kind of modern day equivalent of David Essex, if there even is one. Maybe he's a standalone, maybe there is no competition. But yeah, as I say, I always know that from my mum that David Essex was kind of the kind of heartthrob of the era, definitely. Yeah, Kate Bush made a bit of a resurgence recently as well with that #1, thanks to that TV show as well. Eric Clapton, Blondie, like this generational moving on. Julio Iglesias to Enrique Iglesias. I like that. I actually saw a thing about Julio Iglesias recently. Apparently he is, I think he's the highest selling Spanish speaking, like Spanish language artist of all time. I think Julio Iglesias is, I'm sure I saw. But yeah, I think there's something about that. And yeah, Suma, unfortunately, the people that voted for this list didn't agree, but this is kind of my 70s, is like you say, the kind of classic rock, I guess you'd call it. The AC/DCs, the Led Zeppelins, the Blondie, of course, Aerosmith, Kiss as well. Growing up, I was also very big into rock music. So my kind of music did go back the way, and I kind of remember all these bands when I was growing up. Obviously they weren't current at the time, but that was kind of who I was thinking of. And another memory from when I was young is Smoke on the Water. As everyone that ever has played guitar, probably the first kind of riff solo that they learned was Smoke on the Water. I think it is the classic. Even having not played guitar for 10 plus years, I think you put a guitar in front of me now, I could probably just about still remember. Thankfully, I don't have a guitar, you'll be all glad to know, so I will not be partaking in any live musical performances. But let's have a look at the list. Let's see who remembers these kind of artists. So yeah, as I say, David Essex was, of course, the first one there. Rod Stewart is one that, as I say, about the sort of, when I think about musicians and the time that they were current in, for some reason I wouldn't have put Rod Stewart in the 1970s. I don't know why, because obviously when you think about how old he is now, it would make sense that he was big in the 1970s. But Rod Stewart, obviously a very popular one. There was a lot of pictures of Rod Stewart when we're collecting those pictures for the Houseplant studio as well. So yeah, Rod Stewart, a really popular one. David Essex appears multiple times on the list. Paul McCartney and Wings was one that someone said as well. Who else do we have? We've got Freddie Mercury, of course, a classic. The Bay City Rollers too, we spoke about. Queen, Freddie Mercury as well. I feel like some of these bands kind of transcend eras as well. Like when you see like Elton John on screen, for example, has there been an era in recent memory where Elton John hasn't been current, hasn't been that sort of big thing? And yeah, best instrumentalist, Victoria. Eric Faulkner, not a name that I think I've ever seen before, I will admit. Eric Faulkner. Paul McCartney, Mike Oldfield got a mention earlier on as well. And George saying Maggie May was his first hit in the early 70s. I must admit, not a massive Rod Stewart fan. I do quite like the Faces, I will admit. But yeah, Rod Stewart's music kind of passed me by, I would say, and not one that I got fully into. I think it's funny as well seeing like best disc jockey Noel Edmonds. I think Noel Edmonds is the name I know growing up from the quiz show, game show, which name just totally escapes me now, but Noel Edmonds used to host. Hoping that the more I talk and delay, that someone in the comments is going to remind me which game show Noel Edmonds hosted. I don't know if it's still on, but it was certainly when I was younger. I remember kind of coming home from school and that would be on the TV, but I cannot remember what it was called now. We've got some clarification on Eric Faulkner. Apparently he was in the Bay City Rollers, apparently. So I did not know that. But best instrumentalist, he's one of the best instrumentalists in the 1976 Daily Mirror poll. So very good. Multicolored swap shop. Victoria saying that seems like that would, I think that was too early for me. This was Noel Edmonds, the Deal or No Deal. Did he do Deal or No Deal? I can't remember now. I feel like I've spoken about Noel Edmonds for far too long, but I think it was Deal or No Deal I'm thinking of. It just came to me there, but I'm not sure if that was the one that I'm thinking of now. But as I say, we'll move on. I've already tried to talk about music for too long without going into Noel Edmonds for the rest of the stream. But as I say, someone can remind me if I'm incorrect, but I think it was Deal or No Deal. Good stuff. Thank you very much, everyone. So yeah, that was, as I say, a kind of virtual tour of the Chelsea Flower Show for those of us who aren't going to be able to make it. But if you are there, as I say, be sure to pop in to James's Houseplant Studio Verdant Visions, as I'm sure Ellie will tell us in the comments. It looked really, really cool and yeah, amazing. So if you are there, be sure to pop in, say hello to James, and as I say, tell them that you're a Find My Past member as well. I would love to hear from you all. Yeah, I keep saying I'm done with Noel Edmonds, and then he keeps coming back. But I remember House Party with Mr. Blobby. How could you forget Mr. Blobby? Of course, another one that kind of transcends eras. I think everybody kind of remembers Mr. Blobby at one step or another. But yeah, we did have, keeping in with the 1970s, we did have a question of the week, and that was, what is your favorite thing about the 1970s? What is, whether you were there and you remember growing up, and what was your favorite thing growing up, or like, as I say, some of us looking back, what was your favorite thing about the 1970s as an era? And as I say, already, as soon as I put the question on screen, everyone was kind of collectively reminiscing and seeing there as well. I like this from William. It is a family history show at the end of the day, so it is only right that we start with a comment that takes us back to why we are all here. William says he wasn't around in the 70s, so guessing it will need to be the cine film and other photos from my parents' wedding with all the family friends on, which helps when solving who is who and piecing the tree together. I think that's really cool as well. Like you say, those, even if you weren't there, those memories of the photos, the family photos that you see, whether it is the fashion, the clothes that we're wearing. Like, I'd love to see what people were wearing in a 1970s wedding. I think that would be some amazing outfits in there, I'm sure. And also things like the family photos we're talking about, the interior design too. Like, what was your parents, your grandparents' sofa like in the 1970s? What did their house look like when they were kind of growing up in the 1970s? So yeah, really cool one, I think. And yeah, I think that's cool as well. I did read a thing not long ago about, it was kind of, I can't remember, it was GQ or something like that, and it was talking about kind of do's and don'ts for guests going to a wedding. And one of the tips they gave when dressing for a wedding was to try and dress like timelessly, try not to focus on the fashion of the time, so that in years to come, when people are looking back, much like William looking back at those wedding photos from the 1970s, I'm sure there are a lot of flares, a lot of big collared shirts, a lot of wacky designs on there, a lot of really cool dresses. So I say ignore that tip, dress all the time, because as I say, a 1970s wedding photo, I think, just sounds really cool. I think that would be a photo I would definitely like to see. And we do have a few more. As I say, we'll try and keep things family history related at some point when we can. Sometimes it's nice to have a break and talk more about the things we're interested in too. But Daphne saying her second was born in 1971. So I'd love to hear the kind of memories they have growing up with the children's TV, like we spoke about Noel Edmonds et al. In the 1970s as well. I'm sure they've got cool memories of the 70s and 80s as well. It's cool. Another cool decades too. Christine reminiscent about slumber parties with my schoolmates. I like slumber parties, has always been a word I like. We call it a sleepover here, but I think slumber parties just sounds a lot cooler. I think slumber parties as well. Victoria saying her favorite memory is herself. No better memory to have, Victoria. No better favorite thing to have about the 1970s than yourself. Who else do we have? We've got Ellie saying the music. Yeah, it has been a music heavy session, but the music, you can't talk about the 1970s without talking about the music. As I say, there was a lot going on in the 1970s, but the music is the one that everybody thinks about as well. And Julie, some of these bands have already been mentioned as well. T-Rex was one that I thought would get mentioned. That was one, again, that came up in a lot of the images that were taken from the newspapers for the display. But yeah, T-Rex, a very popular one as well. There's a film about T-Rex and the lead singer, whose name, I'm having a total memory blank today, it seems. But the lead singer of T-Rex, there was a documentary about him not too long ago that I really wanted to see, but sadly it was not on in my local cinema, so I'll need to try and catch that on streaming. And Jean remembers the heat of 1976 when my youngest was born. Whilst living in Cornwall, it was baking hot. I can imagine if there's, I mean, Cornwall is one of those places that seems to kind of get the good weather whenever. But when it's a heat wave, I can imagine Cornwall being almost uncomfortable, I would say, by my standards. I think, like I've said many times, anything higher than the mid-20s is too hot for me. So yeah, I'm not sure how hot it was in that heat wave, but as I say, already sounds like it was too much for me. And who else? Another family-related one. Heather was married in 1971. Congratulations, Heather. And back to the heat waves as well. Proper summers. It's fair to say we're not in a proper summer here anyway, Janet, with the weather that we've had today, the rain that we've had all week and everything. So yeah, definitely not a proper summer that we've had there, but senior school in the 70s and started work in 1974. I'd love to hear, what was that first job you had in the 1970s, Janet? I'd love to hear that as well. And Gina also had her children in the 1970s and the fashion as well. I'm sure we've got some good photos of you back in the day, Gina, in that 1970s fashion too. And I think even the children's kind of clothing, when you see pictures of younger people in the 1970s, I think that's really cool. First jobs, and seems to be a kind of recurring theme as well. Rosie also had her first job in a record shop in 1974. If I could go back to an era and have a job, I think working in a record shop in 1974 sounds really cool to me. I think that working in any record shop these days, I think would be cool. Not going anywhere, obviously, but it sounds like a really cool job. So yeah, I think working in a record shop in 1974 with, like you say, that glam rock era, all the other great music that was going on, that sounds like heaven. As I say, if you could transport me back to working in a record shop in 1974, I would be right there behind the counter with you, Rosie. I think that sounds like a great first job, a great first era. And Andrew saying, being able to drive. Yeah, a lot of people would have been learning to drive in the 1970s as well. I'm sure my dad probably learned to drive in the 1970s, now I think about it as well. A hot summer of 76 as well. Oh, sorry, I've jumped ahead here because it is in date order. I like that, Andrew, in date order. From kind of not in favourite order, but in date order. Being able to drive, music before punk arrived. Not a punk fan by the sound of things, maybe, Andrew. University, the heat wave in 1976, and starting work as well. Again, I'd love to hear what that first job was as well. I think that's cool. And yeah, Ellie agreeing about the pre-punk era as well. See, punk would be one of my favorite kind of genres looking back on there, big like the Clash, the Sex Pistols, etc. So maybe I'm alone here, but I know Sue Moon is a rock chick in the 70s and still rocking. I love that, still rocking. Flares, platform shoes, and living in Brighton. I can imagine Brighton was a really cool place. I mean, it's a cool place these days, but I think in the kind of 1970s, Brighton would have been a good place to be as well. And from a kind of historically relevant point of view as well, Julie makes a good point that moving from the imperial to decimal currency and going out shopping to get change was so exciting. Yeah, I remember my dad speaking about that as well, and he would always still be able to like convert the currency from new back to old, kind of just as a reference point, and he still seems to be able to do that. So yeah, it seems to be something that stuck with the people who grew up in that time period. And we'll go a couple more. Sue Moon also saying, when my brother bought his house in the 1990s, it was still decorated in the 1970s. Big flowery wallpaper, those orange and brown flowers that we've spoken about, the sofa with orange and brown flowers, brown carpet, and an avocado bathroom suite. It sounds like your brother maybe lived in James's houseplant studio, to be honest, Sue Moon. That sounds just about exactly like what was going on in the houseplant studio, right down to the avocado bathroom suite as well. I think, as I said, I remember being younger and thinking about going to like people's houses, and they'd obviously, like you say, been done up in the 1970s, and those kind of, they stick with you, like the color of the bathroom. I can still picture the color of the bathroom in my grandparents' house, for example. The wallpaper they had, like say that brown flowery carpet they had too, as well. So yeah, definitely. Have a look through the comments. Mark Boland is the T-Rex singer. Thank you very much. I knew someone would get it as well. I'm not sure if this comment is related as well, but I'm hoping that is on the Mark Boland documentary as well, perhaps as well. And Janet was a humble bank clerk in 1974. I think the bank was a lot of people's first job. I'm sure my mum's first job was in the bank. Again, probably around the kind of same kind of time as well. So I feel like that is, a lot of people probably have that in common with you, Janet. I feel like the bank and the council seem to be the kind of, certainly that's what my parents were doing in the 70s anyway. I feel like that was probably quite a common thing as well. And Alison was 9. Love my flares and platforms. I remember the power cuts and the long hot summer. I feel like this long hot summer of 1976 is a recurring theme. It's not one that I'd thought about, but then I just thought, what's the song in this? I'm not going to start singing, but in the summer of insert year here. Is that 1976? I can't remember now. As I say, I feel like I just can't remember anything. It's Friday afternoon. It's starting to heat up. The sun's out. Apparently my mind is already on the weekend and I cannot remember a single thing there. But we've got a lot of first jobs. I'm enjoying these first jobs. Just think that when summer 69 it is, I was a good 15 years, not 15 years, can't even do math today. Some amount of years, 7 years behind. I was 7 years behind summer 69. Of course, it's summer 69. But I'm really enjoying this reminiscing about the 1970s, but also about first jobs as well. A lot of people talking about their first jobs, and just think in years to come when people are doing family history and it's you that they're researching, these are the kind of first jobs that people are going to be investigating, and think about how that's changed as well from the first jobs that we see when we're doing our family history today. Think about people finding out that their ancestor was working in a record shop in the 70s, or we've got Elaine, who was in Galloway's bookshop in Aberystwyth, loved it, but tended to spend all the money I earned on books. I know Ellie is right there with you as well. I think probably if I'd gone back to 1974 and worked in a record shop, I think I'd have been handing the wage slip right back over and buying records from all these kind of amazing bands that we spoke about as well. So as I say, I'm sure Ellie will definitely kind of relate to you there as well, Elaine. And Anne was working as a typesetter and occasional proofreader. I learned how awful reporters were at writing. See, that's the kind of behind the scenes that you don't see. You think that they are amazing writers and everything, but when you're seeing it before it goes on, all those kind of spelling errors, grammatical errors, poorly formed sentences, all the kind of hard work that Anne and her team are doing behind the scenes that you don't see. Like you say, I think that would be a bit of an eye-opener. And Andrew was programming on mainframe computers. That is definitely a different one. I like that one. That would be another kind of the time, like you say. Imagine your descendants in years to come finding out that you were there in the early days working on those mainframe computers. I think that's a really cool one to think about as well. Have a look. And this was another song. See, when I thought about, I can't remember, again, totally blank, but whoever sings Summer of 1969, when I kind of started humming that in my head, In the Summertime by Mungo Jerry was another one. And like, so yeah, he was on the list. And when I was having a look through the images earlier, there was, yeah, a lot of kind of Mungo Jerry stuff as well. So that was cool. I feel like I should start wrapping up soon because I'm just waffling at this point. But I am also just loving this reminiscing. I think this is really cool and really interesting. Yeah, thank you everyone very much for sharing all this as well. Because like I say, it has been, I did say at the start that me and Ellie might need educated a little bit on the 1970s. And this has certainly been an education for us as well. And another first job was a cutter of knitwear in a hosiery factory using hand shears before mechanical knives. That's dangerous sounding work for someone like me. I'm not the most kind of ambidextrous person. So using those hand shears, very sharp, I'm assuming, yeah, as I say, it sounds like quite a dangerous job for someone like me as well. And again, as I say, it's educational for myself as well, reminiscent for some of you, but educational for some of us as well. I'm learning so much about this 1976. I didn't realize this was such a big year in our history. We had water rationing as the reservoirs had dried up. And someone else has said, yeah, Jean said that there was petrol rationing as well. So yeah, as I say, did not know this. We've also sugar shortage too. 1976. I was thinking 1976 sounded all right with the kind of heat wave that everyone was talking about, but maybe doesn't sound that great after all. Now that I'm hearing more about this as well, I think that is did not realize all this. And it was Jan. Thank you very much. I knew someone. Brian Adams, of course, it's Brian Adams. Summer of 689 as well. I'm going to read, as I say, I could be here all day. We could just spend the rest of the weekend, me sitting here, and we can all just start reminiscing about our favorite era, because this is just so good. I think everyone is going to be, hopefully like myself, when I'm making my dinner tonight, it's going to be a 1970s playlist that I'm on, because this has been so much fun. And I'm glad someone mentioned it, Julie. Bruce Springsteen, of course, who could forget? I know he's on tour at the moment. It's been amazing seeing the videos of him on tour at the moment. Wish I was there. I had been before, but always wish you were there. Just looks like an amazing night as well. And as I say, I'm going to start limiting myself. I'm going to read 5 more comments. I'm going to read, and then we'll wrap up, because as I say, if not, I will keep you all here right into the evening. We could start having a glass of wine. I could start playing some tunes, find myself a guitar. I could teach you all Smoke on the Water, but we won't. We'll, as I say, limit our comments, and then I can let you all get on and hopefully enjoy the sunshine and your bank holiday weekend as well. More about the petrol shortage. Ellen said they were limited to 10 gallons per fill-up. My VW Bug had a 10-gallon tank, so I was good. Perfect, could not be better. Yeah, Volkswagen Beetles, of course, another iconic thing of the 1970s, and I love that as well. Probably quite a popular car at the time, so I'm sure a lot of people were in Ellen's ship as well and having exactly the amount of ration in there as well. Who else have we got? We have got Alison's first job as an office junior in 1970. I feel like, again, much like the kind of bank and the council that I was speaking about as well, that was definitely a kind of popular first job for a lot of people as well. I like the seeing Brian Adams next month. I did not know he was on tour at the moment, Victoria. I wonder where you are going to see him, because that would be a really cool one to go see as well. And hopefully, I know, as I say, I'm quite a big Bruce Springsteen fan, so I've been keeping close eye on his tour. I know the weather in Sunderland the other night for those kind of open air tours. You think you go to an open air concert in the end of May, the weather's going to be all right, but it was absolutely chucking it down and blowing a gale in Sunderland when Bruce was playing the other day. So hopefully, if it is open air, that the weather is better for you there as well. I like Victoria. FMP party. Maybe we'll do an after hours Findmypast live, where, as I say, we can get the gin and tonics out, we can get the playlists on, we can all enjoy and kind of, as I say, reminisce more about all these. It's one thing talking about all these bands. I would love to just have Spotify open at the moment. Other streaming services are available, and just be playing these music, because as I say, I think it would be really cool. And Ellie is going to find us a playlist to get our 1970s. Oh, her second comment, I spoke too soon. It was a list of plants, not a 1970s playlist. But wherever your streaming service on, I'm sure you could there's going to be 1970s playlists out there as well. I'm sure, as I say, every streaming service will have one. Some people probably even made their own. Maybe that's something we should do. We should make a collective playlist. Maybe I'll need to go back through the comments on Monday when everyone else is enjoying their bank holiday. I can go back and make us a 1970s playlist as well. And I think that was really cool. Do you think that's something we should do more of? Are there other decades we could kind of relive? Because, as I say, I've had a lot of fun. This has been a very low preparation session for me today, because your lovely selves have done all the hard work for me with these amazing memories and amazing music and everything that we've been speaking about there. So maybe, as I say, I feel like I started at the 70s, so maybe we'll jump back in time, and then we can bring it forward as well until we get to a time where me and Ellie do remember. I'm sure Ellie could do us a great presentation on the Spice Girls or on Bewitched, of the music from the 1990s. And I'm sure I've got a lot of memories from there we could all share. But maybe that's something that we will look into. Maybe I'll just make it my own little thing, because, as I say, I've enjoyed this so much, and it's been so easy for me having a great audience like yourselves who are so willing to share and so engaged. It's always a lot of fun doing sessions like this. I think once in a while, just taking a bit of a break. It's summer, it's a bank holiday, we can all reminisce, get the tunes on. But as I say, I will let you all go and enjoy your weekend. Get those 1970s tunes on. Ellie has posted one in the comments for any Spotify users. There is a 1970s playlist on the go. So get that open before the session closes. Get the dinner on, get the wine open, get the gin and tonics out, and we'll all, in spirit, have our 1970s party together there. But as I say, thank you all very much. That has been really fantastic. Thank you all for your lovely comments, your lovely shading from first jobs, family photos, to Mark Boland, T-Rex. It has been a lot of fun. It sets up nicely for the weekend. So I'll let you all go. I will be back probably in about a month's time or so, but everyone else, we will obviously have sessions every week there, and I will speak to you all in the comments before then as well, I'm sure. But for now, thank you all very much again. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will speak to you all very soon.